Good evening, everybody. It's 5:30, and so if you want to take a seat, please do. Thank you so much for being here tonight for the third of 4 forums to meet the finalists who will be selected from as the next Lincoln Police Chief. My name is Jennifer Brinkman. I'm Chief of Staff in Mayor Leary and Gaylor Baird's office, and I'm really pleased to see all of you back here tonight and to say thank you to those that are going to watch this recording and learn more about our candidate this evening. This is another opportunity that's part of our public engagement process to allow the community to learn more about our finalist candidates and to weigh in on the qualities and skills and experience for the person who will be our next police chief. We started back in February asking the community what they wanted to see in the next person to lead our police department, and that included an online survey and virtual listening sessions and focus groups, and those efforts also included meeting with LPD officers, command staff, and other LPD leaders. The results of that process were developed into a report that you can find on the city's website, and it listed those qualities, skills, and experience, and the questions that someone would like to ask a potential candidate who would be our next chief. From that process, we created a position description and a posting that was circulated nationwide, and it resulted in 31 candidates that were interviewed by a community committee, and then we narrowed our list to 4 finalists who were announced on June 3rd. And we're pleased that our 4 finalists are all able to be in Lincoln this week to meet members of the community, members of the police department, and other city leaders. With that, I am proud to introduce Daryl McSwain. He is the current chief of the Maryland National Capital Park Police, the Montgomery County Division. His biography is available on the comment cards at the back of the room and also on the city website. And I'll remind people in place that we hope you'll complete one of those before you leave tonight. As we prepared the program for the forum, we asked each candidate to prepare a presentation covering the following. We wanted them to give a personal introduction, to talk about crime prevention, philosophy, or effective strategies, efforts to address recruitment and retention of police officers, and to also comment on the current state of policing in America and how that would influence their role as the next police chief. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Chief Daryl McSwain to the podium.
Well, thank you all for having me this evening, and I'm honored to be before you this evening. I also want to thank Mayor Baird as well for the opportunity to be able to present before you this day. Well, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and attended the University of Maryland, where I ultimately met my wife today now of 31 plus years. And out of that wonderful union, we've had 4 children. My youngest now is attending nearby Iowa State University. And although she's a Cyclone, yes, I can learn to root for the Cornhuskers as well. But I went to Bowie State University, where I received my master's degree in what is commonly called today public administration. At that time, it was called administrative management. My wife and I enjoy theater. We enjoy parks. We're also active in our church and have been for many, many years. As it relates to public safety, I've been in public safety now for 33 years, 18 years in the command staff position. And as stated before, I'm currently now with the Park Police in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's a very diverse community of a little over 1 million people. I oversee 400 different parks, 250 miles of trails. And the system itself is about 37,000 acres spread over about 490 square miles, if you will. Prior to that, I spent 30 years with the Montgomery County Police, where I ultimately retired as an assistant chief. I had the pleasure of serving in a number of different operational, administrative, and investigative positions, to include community outreach, internal affairs director, special operations commander, where I was involved in the planning and recovery process of man-made and natural disasters. Incident commander on life safety missions, to include the discovery building hostage rescue situation with the suicide bomber. And also served as a public safety operation manager on large-scale events, to include our annual county fair as well as for those who are golfers, the U.S. Open Golf Tournament in Bethesda, Maryland. And as an assistant chief, I oversaw the weekly review and analysis process for the command staff when dealing with crime issues and other matters within the department itself. When I think about crime prevention, my philosophy and/or effective strategies, the key word for me is prevention. I believe in a concept called community safety, not just public safety. And what I mean by that is that I've come to realize that in order to address issues at the root cause, it takes all of us. So I believe whether it's the faith community, civic organizations, the community at large, government organizations, and also business members as well, it takes all of us working together. I grew up in the Baltimore, Washington region, as I stated before, and when I was growing up, I grew up in some challenged communities with crime, and I often reflect back, looking at where my life is today compared to where some of my friends' lives are, unfortunately. And I also reflect, wonder why I didn't end up in a penal institution as many of my friends did, and some of them unfortunately found themselves dead for whatever reason. And I realized it was one main reason. When I was a young person, people continued to invest in my life, whether it was coaches, whether it was my parents or neighbors or teachers. Someone was always investing in my life. And because of that, it has shaped my philosophy on how I deal with crime. I believe that there are three main reasons based upon my experience why people ultimately commit crimes, and it helps to drive my philosophy. One of the first is a lack of hope. You know, the late Dr. Benjamin Mays once stated, "It must be borne in mind that the tragedy of life does not lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy of life lies in having no goal to reach." And in some communities where I grew up, whether it was due to illiteracy or no job opportunities, when people don't see a way forward, it results in no hope. And ultimately, no hope results in desperation. Secondly, lack of access to productive activities and role models. Especially see this with juveniles. When not engaged in productive activities, unfortunately, many of them fall vulnerable to things such as thefts and burglaries and gang activities, so forth and so on. It's one of the reasons why even as a young patrol officer, I partnered with a community member to start a summer basketball league in one of our more challenged communities to give them something productive to do during those crucial summer months when they were not in school. And I even used some of my own money. But it was not a sacrifice for me because I remember that when I was a young person, the coach would come by and pick me up to take me to my Boys and Girls Club football practice because my mother could not be there to drive me to the practice itself. And then the third is the cycle of recidivism due to mental illness and addictions. I truly believe and feel that nonviolent members who have mental illness and addiction, that the last place that they should be housed should be in our penal institutions. The National Alliance of Mental Illness estimates that 15% of men and 30% of women who are incarcerated have a serious mental health and/or addiction problem. What they need is wraparound services. And it's for that reason I've engaged in wraparound type of co-response models, if you will, both within the agency that I currently serve in, but also within the community itself, in which we partner with nonprofits and others to serve in deflection model systems, if you will, which deflect people out of the criminal justice system to services that they can get to ultimately overcome their habit, whether it be substance addiction and/or mental health as well. But when a crime does occur, my response is fairly standard. First of all, my goal is to stop it at the earliest opportunity before it becomes a chronic trend. We do this through timely and accurate information gained through not only technology, but also through human rapport with community members as well. To that issue, I believe also in working with the community in the issues that affect their respective community, where they're a part of that community safety process that I spoke about. Not only do I talk about matters within their community in person, through social media and other means as well, but also allow for anonymous portals for them to share information, because not everybody feels comfortable coming before the police or having police come to their door, if you will. But they still have to live within the community, and everybody wants a safe community. I also believe in a positive presence by officers. I truly believe in getting out of the cars. In my respective job now, we patrol in everything from ATVs to bikes to horses and anything else in between to get out of the cars and develop a rapport with the people, whether it's on trails or in the parks or out in the community itself. But it allows for a nice rapport to be developed between the community member and others in a non-threatening environment. I believe also in strategic approach to crime fighting, if you will. In other words, I don't believe in arbitrary stops. I believe in cooperating leads through objective and constitutional policing strategies. Certainly work with federal, state, and local partners, because those who would prey on members within our communities don't always know jurisdictional boundaries, and to what degree we can work together to stop serious offenses from occurring sooner than later, I believe benefits the entire region as a whole. And then while going through these processes, I believe it's very important to continue community engagement at all times and also be involved in restorative justice processes as well. As it relates to efforts to address recruitment and retention of police officers, I've had very good success over the last 5 to 7 years from both my former agency and my current agency. When I was with the county police, I worked with members from the Human Resources Department and others, to include local colleges and to revamp our entire recruitment process with the help of others who oversaw those processes. In my last year there, 54% of our last academy class consisted of women and or members of color. We brought back our cadet program for our youth, which had been dormant for about 30 years. Just as well, we partnered with a local community college as well, so that young people could not only get college credits, but ultimately get themselves in a position to ultimately come within the police department itself. In the last 2 years since I've been with the Park Police, 66% of our recruits have been people of color and or women. That came through revamping not only our entire recruitment process, but also involving others within the agency to be a part of that process, to include recruiting or creating a diverse recruiting team. I believe in a diverse recruiting team because, one, the diversity of the group allows for different perspectives on how to reach certain communities. Just as well, it creates a level of legitimacy within the community as well. We also reassessed our brand. We did not necessarily want to continue to put videos out there which show us shooting a gun or other matters that some members find offensive, if you will. And let's face it, we don't do that on a regular basis. But what we did want to show to be our brand, if you will, helping people on a regular basis. That's ultimately what we do, and what every person who signs up to do police work simply says they want to help people. We began to also reassess certain levels of the process that we thought were having a disparate impact on certain groups. So for example, one of the first tests is the written test. And for some agencies, the written test was developed maybe 10, 15 years ago. But when you look at those tests, some have cultural biases in them, and or they're use way too much things like police lingo that most people don't understand. I can teach you police lingo when you come into the academy, but what I need to know before you come in the academy is, do you have empathy? Do you have problem-solving skills? Do you have social and emotional intelligence? That's what I want to measure. That's the type of person that you ultimately want to serve you as well. We believe in also having a personal touch to the process as well. So for people that we've identified that would make good officers, we believe in going to them instead of waiting for them to come to us. We believe in making personal phone calls and ensuring that they understand that they're important and not just a number. We've streamlined the process from what used to be a 6 to 8 month process to more like a 3-month process by utilizing technology to assist us in submissions and also combining steps that used to take, again, 6 to 8 months. And then I believe it's so very important that we solicit the full support of the entire agency. When members are proud of their agency, they will recruit for you. Because let's face it, anybody that's a part of something good wants other people to be a part of that same thing as well. So just as importantly, and for those who help to recruit members in, we also began to pay cash stipends, if you will, or leave awards for those members within the agency. As it relates to retainment, I have found that retainment, one of the things that affects retainment the strongest is a healthy culture within the agency. When people look forward to going to where they work and enjoy the environment in which they work, they want to stay. Relentless commitment to employee development is part of that. When people don't feel that they're growing, they become despondent. So we've made it a personal priority to ensure that we continue to invest in the lives of those within the agency, to include temporary duty assignments, but also elective courses that are of interest to them, and also engaging them in the process of developing new initiatives within the agency. Tangible incentives such as college tuition assistance is one who has put 4 children almost through college now. I can attest, it is not easy to put children through college with the cost of college now. But tuition and debt assistance may be something that's of benefit. But then also within the agency, programs that support work-life balances, scheduling, job sharing programs, so forth and so on. Celebrating good work that's done on a regular basis, because everyone wants to be patted on the back. And then also studying lessons learned by those who have exited, through exit interviews, to ensure that we don't continue to repeat those things which may ultimately be hurting us, but learn from them so that we can also move along. So as I think about the current state of policing in America as a whole, and how that would influence my role as the potential police chief, first of all, I'm still very, very encouraged by the positives that I see. I've been in policing, as I mentioned, for 3 decades now. And more than ever, I am still convinced that the vast majority of those who serve in public safety are good, decent, hardworking, brave men and women who truly believe that this is an honorable profession and truly want to help people. But the challenges that I see as it relates to policing as a whole in America, first of all, we became too complacent, not realizing or remembering that trust must be earned in every single community, every single day. Secondly, we became stagnant as a profession, meaning we were slow to react to rapidly changing demographics in our respective societies. And then the third, police in general became prisoners of past traditions. In other words, that's the way we've always done it. But our society now is challenging us to think anew, if you will, for the challenges of today. So there's 3 specific areas that will influence my role as a police chief moving forward. First of all, strengthening police-community relations in all neighborhoods. I have come to realize over time, one size does not fit all. Every community is different, and it needs to be respected for its own uniqueness and ensure that they're involved in the process. And to that point, I promise, first of all, to listen. I promise to seek to understand. Promise to ensure all stakeholders have a place at the table. And also promise to work in partnership to include or to ensure that the community helps to ensure that our training, policies, and practices benefit our community and do not divide us. Secondly, I have found that police training in general emphasizes reactions to what has already happened, with less focus on preventing issues before they occur. For example, most training in police academies across the nation spend the vast majority of time on things such as shooting, defensive tactics, arrest and complaint processes, all very important. The Police Executive Research Forum estimates that only 15% of the 18,000 police agencies across this nation have a crisis intervention training program. The average recruit, they found, receives on average 58 hours of police shooting training, but only about 8 hours for those that actually have a program of crisis intervention training. We've got to actually correct that imbalance, if you will. So yes, we'll continue to teach on officer safety protocols because we want all of our officers to go home safely. We'll also stress preventive training in which everyone, community and the police officers, go home safely. To do that, we'll provide and teach on co-response models to social issues. Police officers cannot be the experts on every social issue we're challenged with in our respective communities. So I've got to ensure that we work with government entities, academia, nonprofits, to ensure that we best serve our vulnerable populations that may be suffering from mental illness, addiction, intellectual developmental disabilities, the homeless, juveniles, members from our LGBT community. We'll be sure to enhance cultural competency training programs to include implicit bias, fair and impartial policing, and also social and emotional intelligence training. De-escalation training will, of course, remain a priority of ours to include conflict resolution and peer intervention. And we'll also continue to emphasize leadership training at all levels. Third, employee wellness programs are either non-existent or woefully understaffed in police agencies across the nation. The quality of any agency is dependent upon the mental, physical, and emotional health of its employees. Unfortunately, in police work, public safety, for far too long, we have continued to be represented in far too large of a numbers in categories of suicide and also divorce. It is a tough job, absolutely, but we've got to find a better way to take care of our people who do this tough job to ensure that the entire society continue to function as it does. One of the things we have to ensure that we eliminate is the stigma that getting help is a sign of weakness. To do that, we'll be sure to expand our collective employee wellness programs, to include onboarding with family members, because that's ultimately their infrastructure, if you will. Confidential and free resources both inside and outside of the agency. Annual in-service for all personnel so that we can eliminate that stigma. And in a full-time unit, I'd love to see with a licensed clinical professional and or psychologist to inform our programs moving forward. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I promise to build on this solid foundation that is Lincoln Police Department, lead with integrity, and serve with sincerity. And ultimately, I believe our collective efforts, both internally within the agency and also in working with you, will ultimately lead us to the one main goal that we all seek, and that's one Lincoln. Thank you all very much.
Okay, I'm going to start with our questions, and then I'll scoot to the side. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Just a reminder, we prepared questions without giving our candidates a heads up, so we'll ask 3 questions before we finish the formal part of the program. Okay, our first question is, can you talk about how to balance the need to listen to criticism while also providing support to your team?
Mm-hmm. Well, whether it's criticism or praise, I believe it's good that people feel comfortable to come and share what they're feeling. So whether it's reality or whether it's perception, perception, as they state, is reality in the mind of the believer. So to the degree that you open up communication both internally within the agency and also in the community, you help to break down those barriers that can be filled, if you will, with rumors. I believe it's a goal of mine, well, certainly should be for us to not only communicate regularly with the community, but also internally. I don't believe they're diametrically opposed. One of the things I believe is important is for us to explain the why behind the what. Very often when one does not do that, again, it leaves a void of information that people have to sort of fill in, if you will. So internally, I believe in ensuring that we have communication vertically and horizontally regularly through the agency itself. I regularly employ multi-group committees, if you will, from throughout the agency to help us resolve challenges that may exist. But just as importantly within the public as well, I believe in having monthly liaison group meetings. I've been meeting with certain groups literally for about 20 years or so, from different facets of the community as well. I don't believe in turning down meetings, so I believe in meeting not only in person, but also through other means that people want to get information, whether it be social media and other means as well. And ultimately, ensuring that we share facts with folks, but then if the criticism proves to be true, that we make the appropriate adjustments and ultimately share what we've done with those who may have had that concern, so that ultimately we move forward. It's okay to be imperfect, but I think it's a disservice to the community if we ultimately don't correct what we find to be something that's less than what we would want to be, and move forward. And then understand, it's okay also that we may not have all the answers internally, and to reach out to resources outside of the agency that will help us to meet expectations and goals that benefit all of us.
Thank you. All right, question number 2. I know we asked you to talk a little bit about recruitment before, but can you talk about specific plans for recruiting more minority and women police officers?
One must understand that for women and minority police officers, they may see recruiting or coming into a police agency through a different lens, depending on their experiences and where they came from. So I believe it's first of all important to put yourself in their shoes. Just as importantly, I talked earlier about diversified recruiting team. So for example, when I first got to my current agency, it was a female that came to me. She happens to be with the LGBT community. And she says, "Chief, I'm concerned. There aren't many women in our agency." I said, "You're right." One, I recognized that she had a passion for it. So I not only put her in charge of our recruiting team, if you will, but gave her the authority to then recruit others that she knew would not only create a diverse team within the agency itself, but also had other great ideas to reach populations that are underrepresented within our agency. And then they found creative ways that, so for example, for those within our Latino community, although those in that age range that we're looking for to come in our agency may speak perfect English, they may live in homes where their parents only listen to Spanish radio. So we began to advertise on Spanish radio. We began to advertise through certain social media portals that certain groups listen to. We began to go to women's events, if you will, to purposely recruit more women. And then we also began to create incentives within the agency for members within the agency to help us also recruit as well. And we have found and had great success with them bringing in people, whether it be a neighbor or whether it be an old colleague, saying, "Hey, we're hiring, I'm going to vouch for you." And ultimately, we have found they have been great additions to our team, if you will. So I believe it's important not only to listen also to respective communities, what's important to you, but also ensuring when they look at our agency, whether it be through videos or pamphlets, they also see representations of themselves within that respective advertisement, if you will, and know that yes, we have a place for you also.
Okay, thank you. Our last question is, how can you ensure the safety of a citizen having a mental health crisis while also maintaining safety for others?
When a pipe breaks in a home, people call the plumber. And when the plumber shows up, they're wearing a belt with many, many tools on the belt. They don't know which tool they're going to need until they get there. I believe the same analogy applies when you're talking about responding to those in mental health crises. You don't know necessarily what you're going to need on scene, so it's important not only do you educate those who are first responders on signs to look for and appropriate strategies to address and diffuse the issue, but understanding what works best for one group or another. So for example, our crisis intervention training that we mandate for all of our officers and continue to spread through the agency and my last agency is one that considers matters such as mental illness, but also those who have intellectual disabilities, because your response to one may not work for the other. But then just as importantly, responding with other professionals within the community itself who specialize in certain areas as such. Mobile crisis unit, which we respond with on a regular basis, but also for those experts within our police agency, the dispatcher automatically dispatches them also to those respective calls for service. So you've got people with multiple skill sets on the same scene, and those who may be considered more of the expert can take the lead regardless of rank. You want the best person handling the situation at the moment. Just as importantly, we've invested in less lethal options for all of our officers as well. And then we've engaged in training such as the Police Executive Research Forum's ICAT training. It stands for Integrating Communication Assessment and Tactics. What it ultimately entails is responding to a scene, understanding that if you work together as a team, you don't necessarily what we call create the moment. In other words, force the issue, but find what's going to be the best process to de-escalate the matter, prevent other innocent members who may be nearby from being harmed, and ultimately resolve the issue peacefully as best you can as one team. And one of the things that I also believe in, which other agencies are now able to do, is starting that triage process as quickly as possible when the initial call for service goes out, which would include potentially adding a behavioral specialist within the emergency communications section where they initially dispatch the call, so they can determine based upon some of the signs that they're listening to, if you will, what the best tools are, if you will, or best options there are to send to that respective scene to ensure that it's resolved peacefully as best as possible and for the good of both the officer's safety but also the community member's safety as well, and that they get the appropriate follow-up assistance that they need to ultimately, hopefully, overcome their challenge. Okay. Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes the formal portion of tonight's forum. So first I want to thank Chief McSwain for coming to Lincoln and participating in our police chief finalist process.
Thank you very much.
I also want to acknowledge our City Parks and Rec Department, who have made Ald Rec Center available for our forums, and Trevor Walkland in particular. He's been very helpful this week. I would invite all of you that are present to help yourself to refreshments in the back. As I mentioned before, there are comment cards back there, and we hope that you will provide written feedback to us about each of the candidates that you've seen at these forums. For those watching at home on Link TV, you can also provide feedback by emailing the mayor at mayor@lincoln.ne.gov or calling our office directly at 402-441-7511. Chief McSwain will be here to meet anyone who wants to engage in discussion at the end of our program, and we hope to see everybody back tomorrow night for our fourth and final forum. Thanks for being here. Have a great night.